Yeah, a couple of stories. We're looking at the January 6th Select Committee. They're considering some unorthodox or perhaps a blast from the past method of holding Steve Bannon and other people who are refusing to come testify. They're trying to find a way to get these people held in contempt of court directly, meaning that the sergeant of arms would be able to go and arrest these individuals. It's something from a throwback from past years. That said, I want us to take a listen to this clip, and I want us to really think about how much power these people really have, arrogance, the caucasity, to be able to look at the United States House of Representatives Select Committee and refuse to testify. And now the committee is trying to figure out how to get around that. Let's take a listen in.
January 6th committee investigating the insurrection at the Capitol issued a fresh round of subpoenas today. The committee seeking both documents and testimony from 6 people. Bill Stepien, manager of former President Trump's failed re-election campaign. Jason Miller, the former Trump senior advisor. Angela McCallum, a former executive assistant to the Trump campaign. John Eastman, a lawyer for Mr. Trump, who wrote a memo about how to challenge the 2020 results. Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, who reportedly attended an Oval Office meeting in December to discuss seizing voting machines. And Bernie Kerik, a Trump ally who the committee says worked with Rudy Giuliani to investigate allegations of voter fraud.
I believe that the time has come for the Congress once again to enforce its own subpoenas. We used to have a process until 1930, from the beginning of the Republic till 1930, in which Congress enforced its own compulsion of testimony subpoenas. And that meant that if necessary, we sent the sergeant at arms or its equivalent and arrested people and detained them until they cooperated with the congressional subpoena. I think the Justice Department takes too long, and I think the courts take too long. It's a very long, torturous process, and meanwhile, we need to be getting things done in real time. People died because of the conspiracy that these people were involved in to overturn the election on January 6th. That was a dagger at the very heart of democracy itself. And we must take that as seriously as it was intended. And we can't rely on the courts to enforce our subpoena.
So, Georgia, as you can see, they're doing their best to make progress to find out and get to the bottom of January 6th. And of course, these individuals are refusing to testify, I would offer, because they know they're culpable. And so now the select committee is having to circumvent some of or rather go back to a throwback of the past and have the sergeant at arms directly arrest these individuals because they're refusing to testify before Congress.
And this is another situation where I just feel like people are trying to wiggle out of being held accountable.
That's right.
If you played a role, be proud, say what you did, and just take the consequence that comes along with it. It reminds me a little bit. I was just watching The Post over the weekend, and another series that documented Watergate. And, when one person comes forth and they start confessing their role, then usually what ends up happening is all of a sudden there's a ton of other people who are implied. And, we have seen people who served in the military who were involved in January 6th. We've seen police officers who were involved in January 6th. We've seen politicians who were involved in January 6th. They all need to be held accountable. And there needs to be some serious consideration on whether or not the people who are serving in those kinds of professional roles should be allowed to continue to serve in those professional roles.
That's right, Georgia. And it really does speak, quite frankly, to the ability in this country for powerful white men, particularly conservative men, to simply do as they see fit with impunity. I mean, just think about the implications of being able to plan and execute an attempted overthrow of this government and then just say, I'm not going to testify.
Yeah. And, I think there was this part in the Post where they said, this looks like a coup. And it brought me back to January 6th, because, there was a moment where President Nixon fired the attorney who was leading the investigation. They had asked for an independent investigation. He fired that attorney really for no good reason, because he was actually doing a good job and was going to start holding people accountable, right? And so he fires the attorney, and they went in and staged a sit-in. And so, it was interesting to see that many decades ago what they considered a coup, and then now having lived through January 6th, seeing what a real coup is, right?
Right.
But this process for justice has been long, and I think our generation will always contrast the treatment of the people on January 6th to the treatment of the people who are standing up for the life of George Floyd, for Dante Wright, for Breonna Taylor, for the injustice that happened to Jacob Blake. Because those instances happened so close together, you cannot help but compare and contrast the treatment of the people who were involved on both sides of these different issues.
And now that you say it like that, Georgia, it makes me think clearly of Kyle Rittenhouse. The fact that him being involved in this entire conversation specifically because of the protests. He turned out as a counter protesters, and now he's almost at the point where he's going to be able to escape responsibility, depending on how this justice system works out. I mean, let me say it like this. What can't an aggrieved white conservative get away with in this country?
Yeah. And, Ben, to take it a step further, there's some parallels even to the man who fatally shot Trayvon Martin. His name is escaping me at the moment.
George Zimmerman.
George Zimmerman. Do you remember the amount of support that people poured out for him? I'm seeing something similar with Kyle Rittenhouse, because he is symbolic of the white men in this nation who want to be able to bear arms, who want to be able to go out in our streets and kill and lynch whoever they feel like it without there being any kind of accountability or consequence.
That's right.
And so Rittenhouse, whether he's found guilty or not guilty, he has garnered so much support from people who believe in what he did, and who likely would go out and do what he did too, and may have been there on January 6th.